Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to toy-polloi and part 2 of my Action Man Seawolf restoration. In part 1 we got the ship looking as you can see it here. There was quite a lot to do on it and I didn't manage to get as much done as I wanted to in the first video, but it's certainly starting to look like a Seawolf. So now in part 2 we'll continue with the restoration and see how much more we can get done in this video. So first up, I'd like to say a big thanks to Colin Ives, who sent me this pile of bits that are all things that I needed for this restoration. So hopefully these will help get us a lot further on because there's some key pieces that I was missing that are included in this little pile of pieces. I still have a few bits left that I need to find, but this is a good start. So let's get on with the restoration and see what we can fix first. First up, we're going to take a look at the periscope section. In my previous video I said I couldn't think of a way of repairing that and I was just going to glue it in place. Now I don't really like just gluing things in place, there's always a better way to fix stuff, and since recording that video I've had a good think and I've come up with an idea that I think is going to work. So what we're going to have to do is take the periscope bit out again. The reason that I want to fix this properly rather than just gluing it is because it's a sort of vital part to the toy. The cockpit sort of section that folds down actually clips in place. You can see there's a tiny clip there that clips underneath the the main section of the periscope, and that holds this whole top in place. So without this being held in firmly, this is just going to end up sort of breaking it off. So I want to fix that in a really secure way, but also in a way that we can still remove it. If I'm just going to glue it in place, you can't remove it, and that's not how the original toy was. So we're going to fix this properly. As I mentioned in the previous video, there should be a couple of little lips on the bottom of this periscope section here that clip underneath the rim of the main part of the sub, but these are often broken off. In fact, they're broken off on this one, and the ones that I was sent also have these bits broken off. So there's no way to hold that bit sort of in place. What happens is if I push this in place, you can see it just sort of folds up. So we need a way of holding this end down. And what I'm going to use is some Lego. If you've watched some of my previous restorations of Star Wars vehicles, you'll realise that I use quite a lot of Lego. And I have a little parts pot here of very useful technical Lego pieces. Now in this parts pot there are two pieces that I thought would be absolutely ideal for fixing this, and these are small double axle pieces. The normal sort of axles are made up of pieces this sort of size, and the small ones, as you can see, are about half the size. And the reason these are ideal is because you can actually clip other bits onto them. So here I have a half sort of technical Lego peg that clips onto that, as you can see. So my plan is I'm actually just going to chop off the top part of this so that we end up with the little sort of peg and this curved piece, and then I'm going to very carefully, if I remove this, score a little hole or file or drill a hole in here so that we can then fit this underneath so that you end up with a little bit of peg coming through. We'll file a small hole in the middle of this sort of front lip section on the periscope so that will then clip over sort of this bit, and then we can use one of these small half pegs to sort of push down, and that should clip everything in place. Now it sounds a bit complicated and I haven't actually tried this ever, so this is going to be a first for me, but I think it will work, and I'll show you as I go along what I'm going to do, and hopefully it will become clear. The first thing to do is to file a little sort of groove in here that's the same diameter as the small Lego peg. So I have some small needle files here, and I'm just going to use that to very carefully file this down. It may take 10 minutes or so, but it's certainly going to be worth doing. So let's get this filed out. So I've managed to file down a hole in the middle there, as you can see, and the Lego bit looks like it's about to fit. Obviously I haven't trimmed the Lego bit down, so it's never going to fit perfectly at the moment, but you can see that that should work. And then if I show you on the side, you can see that it sticks out just about the right amount. I think that's going to catch quite nicely on the lip of the periscope. So next thing we need to do is to trim this down. I'm just going to use a pair of plastic nippers to trim away most of the plastic, and I want to leave it so that there is a sort of a flap of plastic underneath that we can use to glue this in place. So let's get this trimmed down and see if we can get that to fit quite snugly. So I just have a pair of plastic nippers here. I use these a lot because they're very good for trimming down bits of plastic like this. And I'm just going to carefully start cutting this piece of Lego, and we'll get it shaped, and should be able to make something that fits quite snugly. Lego's pretty good as well because you can really easily trim it. It's very easy to cut, And it's also very easy to get, which is the main reason why you can easily buy pieces from, well, I buy these off eBay, so they cost a few pounds to buy a sort of a whole load of bits. As you can see, you can shape it pretty quickly. After about 5 minutes of fine tuning, I've ended up with a piece that looks like this. As you can see, it's a slightly curved sort of flat piece. I've actually bent the Lego to be flat because it had a slight angle to it. You can see the little stub of the peg in the middle of it. I've trimmed this side down as well, but this now fits perfectly into that little hole that I've sort of filed in the front, as you can see there. So you end up with a little peg sticking up, which is exactly what we need, because then I can file a groove into the front section of this that fits in, and I can use the other bit of Lego just to sit on top there. I may even just glue that in place just for something to hold that from flipping up, and we can trim that down to be a sort of a flush little fit, and that should work pretty nicely. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to glue in this piece. I'm just going to use a bit of super glue just to glue that in, and the reason for the two little wings on either side is because the periscope, the main force is going to be pushing upwards, so the two little wings should stop this from being able to be pulled out, which is all that I wanted it to do. So we'll glue this in place, bit of super glue, and then we can see about filing down the periscope. While we're waiting for the glue to set, I'm just going to file another little groove in the front of this periscope, which will lock in place underneath the bit of Lego. So it's really just got to be right in the middle, and then just a bit of filing. This again shouldn't take too long to do. The plastic is fairly easy to file. It's just a case of making sure it's deep enough down that it matches. So here's the groove filed in the front of the periscope section. There's the little Lego peg in place, so we can just try and slot this in and see if everything lines up before we start getting the last bits done. So just slot that in. As you can see, that lines up pretty nicely. There's enough of the Lego peg sticking up that I should be able to just pop that on the top there just to check that it actually fits. And it does, look at that, perfect. So that's pretty good. I'm really happy with how that's come together. Next thing to do then is just to trim down this tiny bit of peg so that we've just got the end little bit, and then we'll glue that in place, and hopefully once that's glued in place you shouldn't be able to push down on that to unping it, because everything should be held there, which is what we wanted. So let's get this trimmed down and glued on, and we'll see how it all works. So I'm just going to trim this down with the plastic nippers. It should be able to cut through that. There's a nice sort of little line that I can just work to, and if I just chop that, should chop pretty nicely, and it has, just needs a little bit of filing on the inside there. I've positioned the bit of peg so I know roughly where it should fit. As you can see, there needs to be about sort of 2-3 millimeters of space, and I can just take that off, and I'm going to dab a tiny amount of super glue onto that top bit of Lego just in the middle. Then if I push the bit of Lego on, I can then drop another little bit of super glue just around the edge, and we'll let that go off. It needs to be about like so. Now that the glue has had time to dry, we can check the fit of the periscope section. So all I've got to do is squeeze that into the gap, which is a little bit tight already, and we can push that along, and there we go, it's now clipped in place. And that is pretty firm actually. I'm putting quite a pressure on that, which is the sort of same pressure you would put on it when closing the lid, and it's holding in place nicely. So all I need to do now is just to paint that black. I'm going to use a little bit of Humbrol acrylic paint just to paint that black so that it's not so obvious. I think if I painted it blue it would be a bit too obvious. Black means it will sort of match in with the periscope, and then we can move on to the next part of this restoration. I've now given that a quick coat of paint there, just with some Humbrol number 33, and as you can see that blends in pretty well. You'd hardly even notice that was an additional piece, and it holds the periscope section in really well. I can actually push down pretty hard on that and it's not going anywhere. So we can now go about fitting the missing bits for the periscope. I had one piece and I've now got the two remaining pieces, so let's get that all fitted and we'll see how it works. And here we have all the periscope sections. This was the bit that I had originally, so it was just the main sort of periscope holder and the the sort of the functional moving bit. And since the last video I've been sent, here is the little sort of control screen that clips on there, and that stops everything falling down, which was the key bit that I was missing, because without that the whole part of this falls into the inside of the sub, so it's a bit annoying. I just got to rotate that a bit just to make it line up. And then here is the front sort of periscope section, which just neatly sort of sits in that little hole on the front. So now that's the whole periscope section. I'm not really sure how it's supposed to work, because when that raises up it just falls down, and maybe that's just supposed to rise up with the water sort of keeping an air bubble in it, but that is the whole section. So we'll fit this onto the sub, and that's that bit done. Here is the periscope in place, so if I move the little monitor screen up you can see that the periscope rises, then you can raise that extra bit just a bit higher to make it to its full height. The next thing I want to take a look at fixing is this front section. It should have a little gripper claw here which has this camera attachment. Now this was what I was originally sent, which is sort of one part of the gripper claw. I've still not been able to find this other side to the claw. I'm hoping to find that at some point. I did manage to find a little camera, so that's quite good, and that just slots in there. But the real problem is this needs to mount onto the front of the Seawolf like that. Now the little bit of plastic that should attach this to the front of the Seawolf seems to be incredibly hard to find. I've not found any of them. The only way I've been able to see one is to actually buy an almost complete Seawolf to get it, and that seems a bit crazy. So I'm going to work out a way to make my own. Now I've had a good look round to see what sort of things are about the right size, and remarkably enough I found if you look at milk cartons, which you get here in the UK, these are the plastic milk cartons, the lid goes on like that. This lid and this screw section is almost a perfect fit for the front of the Seawolf. If I just move everything out of the way and show you the Seawolf, you can see that it fits on pretty perfectly. And I did a little quick test. I cut a hole in the top of one of these milk carton lids, and you can push that. It takes a little bit of force because it's slightly too tight. You can push that onto the front. So that seems like a good starting point. So I'm really not quite sure how I'm going to do it, but I think these milk carton lids are going to be how I am going to do it. So I'm going to have a little play and I'll see what I can come up with and see if we can make a new attachment for the front of the Seawolf here. And this is what I've come up with. It may not look like much, but I think it's going to work. So here are the two lids, and I've cut holes in the top. Now these holes, that size hole will fit perfectly on the front of the Seawolf, and it will also fit over this front claw section. If I show you, I can just push that in like that, and it fits pretty nicely. I've just coloured it black with a marker pen because I don't think the spray paint will stick particularly well to this surface, and I think marker pen will actually just do the job because it just needs to be a little bit rough and ready. Now out of a third lid I've cut the middle section, so you can see there of the top. This you can push inside and it sort of clips in place where the sort of screw fitting is on the inside, and that holds that quite neatly in place. Then here is the screw part of the top of the carton, and I'm going to insert that, I can't remember which way around I put it, like that in there, and then I'm going to use the hot glue gun to glue that all in place so that that can then still rotate. And then once that's all dry, I've got another one here, and I'm going to hot glue gun that onto the back of the first lid, and there we'll have a new fitting which should then fit onto the Seawolf. So let's get this all glued in place and we'll see if it actually works. I think it will, and by the time it's all sort of finished coloured in and black, it should look pretty good. Now that the glue has had time to cool, I'm just going to take a knife and trim out any of these bits that have just sort of squirted out the sides. That's why hot glue is pretty good for this, because you can easily trim it off at the end. Now if everything's gone to plan, these two lids that are glued together should still fit on the front here of the Seawolf. So let's push this on and we'll see how well it fits. It's going to be quite a tight fit from what I think. Give that a bit of a twist just to get that in place, and there we go. That looks pretty good actually. I'm really pleased with that, considering it is just made out of a couple of old lids. Now you can still rotate the claw section, and if I stick the camera bit in, you can see that rotates quite well. So that's a pretty reasonable sort of replacement bit there. I think I will paint it. At the moment it is just coloured with black pen, so it's not I don't know, the finish is not too bad. It doesn't actually match the original plastic. I might leave it. I think maybe a quick coat of some acrylic paint should make that look a lot better. But there we go, that does look like it's attached now. So if you can't find that part, then a couple of old milk carton lids and it looks pretty reasonable. And that's it for part 2 of the Seawolf restoration. As you can see, it's actually starting to come together quite nicely. It now does really quite look like the Seawolf. We've got a few more bits added to it. The periscope section is now complete and the dome clips on pretty nicely. So that's a good thing. I'm glad that we managed to fix that in this episode. Also, I'm pretty pleased with how the claw looks on the front there. It's obviously not perfect, but it certainly does the job. At some point I hope to find the original piece, but for now that is a pretty good fix. So join me in part 3 and we'll try and get the rest of this Seawolf back up and running. Now if you enjoy watching toy-polloi and would like to help out with future restorations, then please check out my Patreon page. Links to that are in the description for this video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter and Facebook.